What you're about to hear is going to shock you to your core. Just minutes ago, something happened in Washington that nobody saw coming. Something that has sent shockwaves through the White House, through Wall Street, and through every political strategist's office in America. 6 Republicans, Trump's own party members, just voted against him. They stood up in Congress, looked their party leader in the eye, and said, no. And folks, this isn't just any vote. This is about Canada. This is about tariffs. This is about a trade war that's about to explode into something we've never seen before. This is about the Republican Party fracturing right before our eyes. The political establishment is in panic mode. Trump is threatening consequences. The White House is scrambling, and the entire foundation of American trade policy is being challenged at this very moment. Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal will change everything you thought you knew about American politics in 2026. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm here today not just as a reporter, but as someone who's been covering the Trump-Canada saga from day one. And let me tell you, I've seen a lot in my years of journalism. I've covered presidential impeachments, government shutdowns, international crises, and economic meltdowns. But what happened in the House of Representatives just hours ago? This is unprecedented. This is the kind of moment that history books will reference decades from now. Before we dive deep into this breaking story, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming in the next few weeks. This Canada-US trade war is just getting started, and I'll be bringing you every single development as it happens. No mainstream media filter, no corporate bias, just raw, honest analysis of what's really going on. Now let's talk about what just went down in Washington, because folks, this isn't just politics as usual. This is a full-blown rebellion inside the Republican Party. And Donald Trump, he's absolutely furious. His entire strategy is being challenged. His authority is being questioned. And the consequences of this vote could reshape American politics for years to come. Here are the facts. Cold, hard, undeniable facts that you need to understand. The House of Representatives just voted 219 to 211 to repeal Trump's tariffs on Canada. Now you might be thinking, oh, okay, so what? Congress votes on stuff all the time. They pass resolutions. They debate policy. That's literally their job. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. Here's where this story transforms from a routine congressional vote into a political earthquake. 6 Republicans, members of Trump's own party, crossed the aisle and voted with the Democrats. 6 Republicans looked at the pressure from their president, looked at the threats from party leadership, looked at the potential consequences for their political careers, and said, you know what, we don't agree with our president on this one. We're going to do what we think is right for our constituents, regardless of what it costs us personally. Let me repeat that, because I want you to understand the magnitude of what just happened. 6 Republicans voted against Trump on a major policy issue, on an issue that Trump himself has made central to his political identity, on an issue where he explicitly threatened consequences for anyone who dared to oppose him. Now, I've been doing this job for a long time. I've covered Republican administrations, Democratic administrations, divided governments, unified governments. You name it, I've reported on it. And I can tell you with absolute certainty, this kind of party defection on a major economic policy, this is rare. This is exceptional. This is the kind of thing that makes political historians sit up, put down their coffee, and start frantically taking notes because they know they're witnessing a genuinely significant moment in American political history. But here's what makes this even more explosive, even more dramatic, even more consequential. Trump didn't just sit back and watch this happen. Oh no, that's not his style. Before the vote, he issued a warning, a threat, really. He went on social media and made it absolutely crystal clear there would be serious consequences come election time for any Republican who dared to vote against him on this issue. Think about that for a second. Really let that sink in. The President of the United States threatening members of his own party with political retaliation, with ending their careers, essentially, if they don't vote the way he wants them to vote. That's not normal. That's not how a healthy democracy is supposed to function. That's the behavior of someone who expects absolute loyalty, who demands complete obedience, who views any disagreement as betrayal. And you know what those 6 Republicans did? They looked at Trump's threats. They calculated the risks. They understood that Trump could endorse primary challengers against them. They knew that conservative media would attack them. They recognized that Trump's base might turn against them. And they voted against him anyway. That takes guts, or maybe it's political calculation. Or maybe, and this is what I think is really happening here, what the deeper story is beneath the headlines, maybe these Republicans are seeing something in their districts, hearing something from their constituents that's making them realize the American people don't want this trade war with Canada. The voters back home are telling them that Trump's tariff strategy is hurting real families, destroying real jobs, damaging real communities. Now, you're probably wondering, who are these 6 Republicans? What districts do they represent? What's their background? Why would they risk Trump's wrath? What could possibly motivate them to take such a dangerous political gamble? And that's where this story gets really, really interesting, folks, because these aren't random backbenchers who nobody's ever heard of. These aren't first-term representatives who stumbled into Congress by accident and don't really understand how Washington works. These are calculated, experienced politicians who know exactly what they're doing. They understand the game, they know the rules, and they're choosing to break those rules anyway. Several of these representatives come from border states: Michigan, New York, Pennsylvania. States where the Canadian border isn't just a line on a map that appears in geography textbooks. It's an economic lifeline. It's the difference between prosperity and poverty. It's what determines whether factories stay open or shut down. It's what decides whether workers have jobs or file for unemployment. These are districts where American workers cross into Canada every single day for work, where American businesses rely on Canadian suppliers for essential components, where American manufacturers depend on Canadian raw materials to keep their production lines running, where the local economy is so deeply, fundamentally, inextricably intertwined with Canada that you literally cannot separate one from the other without causing massive economic devastation. And here's the thing that the mainstream media isn't talking about enough, the angle that's getting lost in all the political drama. These Republicans are hearing from their constituents. And I don't just mean a few angry emails or the occasional phone call to their district office. I'm talking about floods of communication, town halls packed with worried voters, business leaders demanding meetings, union representatives showing up at their offices with economic data, families writing letters about how these tariffs are destroying their livelihoods. When a truck driver in Detroit loses his job because the bridge to Windsor is backed up with multi-hour delays and his company can't make deliveries on time anymore, he doesn't care about Trump's tough guy rhetoric on trade. When a factory worker in Buffalo sees her plant announce layoffs because Canadian parts aren't coming through customs fast enough and the production schedule is completely disrupted, she doesn't care about America First slogans or campaign promises. When a small business owner in upstate New York watches his profit margins evaporate because Canadian supplies suddenly cost 25% more due to tariffs, he doesn't care about political loyalty or party unity. They care about putting food on the table. They care about paying their mortgages. They care about keeping their health insurance. They care about whether their kids can afford to go to college. They care about the concrete, practical, real-world impacts of policy decisions on their daily lives. And that's what these 6 Republicans are responding to. They're not making this decision in a vacuum. They're not acting on abstract principles or ideological commitments. They're choosing their constituents over their president because their constituents are screaming at them that this trade war is destroying their communities. They're making a calculation that representing the people who elected them is more important than maintaining party discipline. And honestly, as someone who believes deeply in representative democracy, as someone who thinks that elected officials should actually listen to the people they represent, I have to respect that decision, even if it's causing absolute chaos in Washington right now, even if it's infuriating Trump and his allies, even if it's creating a massive political firestorm. So how did Trump react to this betrayal? How did he respond when 6 members of his own party publicly defied him? Well, if you know Trump, if you've been following his career, his presidency, his entire approach to politics, you can probably guess. He did not take it well. In fact, not well might be the understatement of the century. Within hours of the vote, literally hours, Trump took to social media. And folks, his statement was, well, it was pure Trump. It was angry. It was defiant. It was full of threats and warnings and barely concealed rage. It was the kind of response that makes his critics shake their heads and his supporters cheer, depending on which side of the political divide you're on. He called the Republicans who voted against him disloyal. He said they were weak. He accused them of caving to the radical left and betraying American workers. He warned, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the meaning was absolutely clear, that they would face the full wrath of Republican voters in the next election, that he would personally ensure they paid a price for their treachery, that their political careers were effectively over. But here's what's fascinating to me as a journalist who's covered Trump for years, who's watched his rise and his influence and his hold over the Republican Party. His threats aren't landing the way they used to. His warnings don't carry the same weight they once did. His ability to intimidate Republicans into submission seems to be weakening. Back in 2016, 2017, 2018, during his first term, and the years immediately following, if Trump threatened a Republican with a primary challenge, if he suggested that he might endorse an opponent, if he even hinted at his displeasure, that politician would usually back down immediately, almost instantaneously. Trump's endorsement meant everything in Republican politics. His disapproval could end a political career before it even really began. I watched it happen over and over again. Republicans who initially criticized Trump would suddenly become his biggest defenders. Politicians who promised to stand up to him would fall in line the moment he turned his attention their way. The few who maintained their opposition, people like Jeff Flake, Bob Corker, Justin Amash, ended up leaving Congress entirely, either by choice or by losing their primary elections. Trump's control over the Republican Party seemed absolute, total, unquestionable. But something's changed. Something fundamental has shifted in the political landscape. Maybe it's because Trump's been out of office for a period. Maybe it's because voters are tired of the constant drama, the endless chaos, the perpetual crisis atmosphere. Maybe it's because even the most loyal Trump supporters are starting to feel the economic pain of his policies in their own wallets and are wondering if maybe, just maybe, there might be a better way. Maybe it's because these 6 Republicans looked at internal polling data and realized that Trump's hold on their specific districts isn't as strong as his hold on the national Republican Party. Maybe they saw numbers showing that their constituents, even Republican voters, want this trade war to end. Maybe they made a calculated bet that local economic interests would trump national party loyalty when their voters step into the ballot box. Whatever the reason, whatever combination of factors led to this moment, these 6 Republicans looked at Trump's threats and said, "We'll take our chances." They looked at the most powerful figure in their party, a man who has ended political careers with a single tweet, and they said, "No, not this time, not on this issue." And you know what that tells me? It tells me that Trump's grip on the Republican Party might not be as absolute as he thinks it is. It tells me that cracks are forming in what once seemed like an impenetrable wall of party unity. It tells me that there are limits, real, meaningful limits, to how far Republicans will follow Trump, especially when following him means economic destruction for their districts. Those cracks could become fractures. Those fractures could become a complete break. We're not there yet. Let me be clear about that. The Republican Party isn't about to split in 2 tomorrow morning, but the foundation is shifting, the ground is moving, and anyone who's paying attention should recognize that this vote represents something significant. Now let's talk about Canada for a minute, because this isn't just an American story. This isn't just about internal Republican Party politics or Trump's leadership style or congressional voting patterns. This is a 2-country drama, an international crisis, a fundamental challenge to one of America's most important bilateral relationships. And Canada, under Prime Minister Mark Carney's leadership, has been playing its cards very, very carefully. Mark Carney is, by any objective measure, one of the most strategic, sophisticated politicians on the international stage right now. Before becoming Prime Minister, he was Governor of the Bank of Canada, then Governor of the Bank of England. He understands economics at a level that most politicians simply don't. He knows how markets work, how trade flows operate, how supply chains function, how tariffs ripple through entire economic systems. And he's been absolutely brilliant in how he's handled this situation with Trump. He hasn't responded to Trump's provocations with anger or emotional outbursts. He hasn't escalated with matching tariffs and trade restrictions, at least not yet, not in ways that would cause a complete breakdown in the relationship. Instead, he's been methodical, calculated, strategic, patient. Carney understands something that Trump seems to have forgotten or perhaps never fully grasped. Canada isn't just some small country that can be pushed around at will. Canada isn't a minor player on the global stage that has no choice but to accept whatever terms America dictates. Canada is the United States' second largest trading partner. Billions of dollars in trade cross that border every single day. Billions with a B. And a huge chunk of that trade isn't luxury goods or optional purchases. It's essential to American industries, to American manufacturing, to the American economy functioning at all. Think about the auto industry for a moment. American car manufacturers, Ford, GM, Stellantis, rely on parts that are made in Canada, shipped to the United States, assembled into vehicles, and then sold around the world. That supply chain is so integrated, so interconnected, so fundamentally dependent on smooth cross-border movement that you literally cannot untangle it without causing massive economic damage to both countries. A single car might have components that cross the border 5, 6, 7 times during the manufacturing process. Raw materials mined in Canada, processed in the United States, turned into parts in Canada, assembled in the United States. It's not like you can just flip a switch and move all of that production somewhere else. We're talking about billions of dollars in infrastructure, thousands of specialized workers, decades of developed relationships and logistics systems. Or think about energy. Canada supplies a huge amount of oil and natural gas to the United States. When you're filling up your gas tank in Seattle or Detroit or Buffalo or anywhere in the northern United States, there's a very good chance that fuel came from Canada. It's part of North American energy security. It's what keeps American drivers on the road and American industries powered. Cut off that supply, or even just make it significantly more expensive through tariffs, and American gas prices skyrocket overnight. American consumers feel the pain immediately. American businesses that depend on transportation see their costs explode. The political consequences would be enormous. Carney knows all of this. He knows it in detail. He knows the exact dollar amounts, the specific industries, the vulnerable points in American supply chains, and he's been making the case, not just to Americans, but to the entire international community, that Trump's tariffs are reckless, destructive, economically illiterate, and bad for both countries. He's been strategic about it, too. He's not just complaining or whining or playing the victim. He's been building alliances. He's been reaching out to American governors, American business leaders, American members of Congress. He's been making the economic case with hard data and concrete examples. He's been positioning Canada as the reasonable party, the adult in the room, the country that wants to work together rather than tear everything down. And you know what? His message is resonating, not just with Democrats who would oppose Trump anyway, not just with moderates who already had concerns about the tariffs, but with Republicans, members of Trump's own party who represent districts where the Canada relationship actually matters, where the economic integration is so deep that untangling it would cause immediate, visible, devastating harm. These 6 Republicans who just voted against Trump didn't do it because they suddenly became fans of Mark Carney or because they love Canada so much. They did it because Carney's economic arguments are compelling, because the evidence is overwhelming, because their constituents are proving through their desperate phone calls and emails that this trade war is hurting real people. Let me lay out some numbers for you because numbers don't lie. Statistics don't have political biases. Economic data doesn't care about partisan talking points. And the economic data on these Trump tariffs on Canada is absolutely devastating. Since Trump announced these tariffs, here's what we've seen on the ground. American companies that rely on Canadian goods have reported widespread supply chain disruptions, delays that turn hours into days, days into weeks, increased costs that are eating into already thin profit margins, uncertainty that makes it impossible to plan more than a few weeks ahead. Some companies have already announced layoffs, quietly, without much fanfare, but the jobs are disappearing nonetheless. Others are preparing contingency plans to move operations out of border states entirely, to relocate to places where they don't have to deal with this chaos. Canadian companies, who for generations have viewed the United States as their natural market, their primary customer, the obvious destination for their products, are now looking elsewhere. They're actively seeking new trading partners. They're making deals with Europe, with Asia, with other countries who don't threaten them with tariffs every other week, who don't treat trade agreements as suggestions that can be ignored on presidential whim. And here's the thing that should absolutely terrify every American business owner, every American worker, every American who cares about long-term economic prosperity. Once those supply chains shift, they don't shift back easily. When a Canadian company decides to start selling to Germany instead of Michigan, that's not a temporary adjustment that can be reversed as soon as the political winds change. That's a long-term strategic decision that involves new contracts, new relationships, new infrastructure, new logistics systems. That decision could last for decades. We're not just talking about short-term pain here, folks. We're not talking about a rough quarter or a difficult year that businesses will ride out until things return to normal. We're talking about a fundamental restructuring of North American trade relationships. We're talking about economic ties that took generations to build being severed in months. We're talking about changes that could define the American economy for the rest of this century. And if you're an American worker in a border state, if you work in manufacturing or logistics or any industry connected to cross-border trade, that should scare you. That should keep you up at night, because your job, your livelihood, your ability to support your family depends on those trade relationships continuing. Here's the reality that Trump either doesn't understand or doesn't care about. Canada doesn't need the United States as much as he seems to think they do. Yes, America is their biggest trading partner. Yes, the economic relationship is enormously important to Canada. But they have options. They have other markets. They have the entire world willing to do business with them, especially right now when so many countries are looking for alternatives to American economic dominance. Meanwhile, American companies that have built their entire business models around easy, frictionless access to Canadian resources and Canadian markets, they're the ones who are going to suffer most. They're the ones who are going to cut jobs when their costs increase. They're the ones who are going to move operations overseas when doing business across the Canadian border becomes too difficult or too expensive. This is why those 6 Republicans voted the way they did. They're not economic geniuses, they're not trade policy experts, but they are hearing from businesses in their districts who are literally begging for this trade war to end. They're hearing from workers who are terrified about losing their jobs. They're hearing from families who are watching their cost of living skyrocket because goods from Canada are suddenly more expensive. They're seeing the real-world consequences of these tariffs in their communities, and those consequences are bad, really bad, devastating in many cases. So let me bring this all together and tell you what I think this really means. What happened in the House of Representatives is significant. 6 Republicans voted against their president on a major policy issue. That doesn't happen every day. When it does happen, it tells us something important about where we are as a country, about the state of our politics, about whether the system of checks and balances that the founders designed is still functioning. This vote is a signal, a warning, a crack in what once seemed like an impenetrable wall. It's a signal that Trump's approach to Canada and possibly his broader approach to trade policy, to international relations, to governance itself, doesn't have the support he thinks it does. It's a signal that the economic pain of these tariffs is real, is widespread, is being felt by American businesses and workers who thought America first meant protecting their jobs, not destroying them. But this is just the beginning. This one vote isn't going to end the trade war with Canada. It's not going to magically solve all the problems in the U.S.-Canada relationship. The resolution still has to go through the Senate, where it faces an uncertain fate. Trump still has enormous influence over his party. The Republican establishment is still largely behind him. However, the foundation is shifting. The ground is moving beneath our feet. And those of us who are paying attention, who are watching carefully, who understand how political movements build and collapse, can see that something fundamental is changing in American politics. The real question, the question I'll be following closely in the coming weeks and months, the question that will define the next era of American governance, is whether this represents a broader shift in the Republican Party. Are we seeing the beginning of a real pushback against Trump's leadership? Or is this just a one-off vote on a specific issue that will be forgotten by next week? I don't know the answer to that yet. Nobody does. History is being written in real time, and we won't know how it ends until it's over. But I'll be watching. I'll be reporting. I'll be bringing you the analysis you need to understand what's happening, because this matters. This story, this trade war, this congressional vote, this challenge to presidential authority, this matters for every single American. It matters for your job, your wallet, your future, your children's future. And you deserve to know the truth about what's really going on. If you found this analysis valuable, hit that like button and share this video. Subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on notifications. Drop a comment with your thoughts. This is history happening right now, and we're witnessing it together. Thanks for watching. Stay informed. I'll see you in the next one.